a great lawn. My name is Rochelle Levan, and I've been a master gardener since 2022. I'm helping with the landscape success classes, and Nancy is our programs director. So Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, along with the Fort Bend County Master Gardeners, offers this landscape program, and it is a 6-class online program aimed at helping the home gardener create a beautiful home landscape and to maintain it. We will be recording this class, and we'll also be sending a link to everybody who has registered for the class, and that'll happen about a week later, sometime sooner. But we will be recording it, so you will get all the information that you will see here in the class. Also, I just want to remind everybody to please mute yourself and stop your video or turn off the video so that we get a good recording. If you have any questions during the class, please enter them in chat. We'll be monitoring them and answering as we go. And we will also answer questions at the end if you don't see those answers within our presentation. So today, I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, who is Boone Holliday. He is the Fort Bend County Extension Agent in Horticulture for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. He holds an undergraduate degree in horticulture from Stephen F. Austin State University and a master's degree in agricultural education from Texas A&M University. Whoop. Long before attaining these degree titles, he was an avid gardener and young plant enthusiast. Having work experience in many horticultural industries, from retail horticulture to landscape design and irrigation installation, he brings that knowledge, paired with enthusiasm, into Fort Bend County programming efforts. He's happily married to his wife, Sony, and is the proud father to daughter Bailey, and currently resides in Fulshear, Texas. And Boone is a wealth of knowledge. You will love his presentation. And I'll turn it over to you, Boone.
Thank you, Rochelle. I appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Please, everybody, please remember to mute. Susan, I think you can mute everybody.
On it.
Okay. Is that better, Boone?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Just barking dogs. I guess we're used to that while we're doing virtual stuff. That's the new reality of the world.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, there we go. All right. Can you see my screen there?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Well, hello and howdy, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you today. We have a topic of growing a great lawn. And I'm going to talk about everything lawn care in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
This could be a full day presentation, particularly in our area where growing grass has become a little difficult with weather, with droughts, with freezes, weed pressure, disease, insects. It seems like everything's stacked against us to grow a good lawn at home, but we're going to just skim the surface and go through all the principles, you might say, considerations on how we try to grow this little space here. So again, we've got a couple wranglers in the background. If you have your microphone turned on, please mute that. If you have your video feed on, please shut that video feed off so that we can get a good, clean presentation for folks. I'm sure we'll have individuals chiming in a little bit late. We understand that, but we'll just try to make it pleasant and ability for people to concentrate on the presentation. As far as questions for this, there's a lot of content on growing lawns. So I'm going to ask that we do a couple things. We have the chat feature. If you scroll down to the Zoom toolbar, you'll see chat on there. If you have questions, open up that chat box and enter those questions into the chat. We've got several fantastic Fort Bend Master Gardeners on the back end of this who will be responding to those questions, adding links into the chat box for you to reference. Rochelle, who's our host today, if she finds questions in there that are pertinent to that part of the presentation, she will interject me and I will answer those questions. But if it's something that's particular to you, maybe it's a little random, we're going to ask that maybe you hold those questions off until the end of the presentation. More than likely, I'm going to cover it. It's a lot of content here. So just be patient. More than likely, I'll get those questions answered. But if we get to the end and we haven't gotten to that, we'll have time. We'll hang around for a while and dialogue with those particulars. Also, we'll make reference several times during the presentation of our Fort Bend Master Gardener Help Desk. This is a group of trained volunteers here at our office that are here Monday through Friday to take your questions. Usually in the morning from about 9 to noon is our normal hours for the help desk. They'll put the link to that in the chat box for you, so you can find that later on. But if you've got questions, they're probably going to take more time than we have today to address. I would encourage you to reach out to the help desk. You can send in, there's an inquiry from the Fort Bend Master Gardener website. You can fill out and send to them. You can email them directly. You can phone call into the office, or you can stop by our office, the extension office here in Rosenberg, during those hours and come talk to a live person, bring in samples of your dead or dying plants, and we'd be glad to try to figure out what's going on and how to help you out. So that's kind of our policy for the presentation today. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started right now. So a bunch of stuff, as I mentioned, we'll cover today. This presentation, I've kind of tweaked a little bit, but I have to give credit to one of my cohorts up in Montgomery County. Mr. Michael Potter is the extension agent for Montgomery County up in Conroe, and he developed the original version of this presentation, and I've kind of chewed on it, spit some stuff out, and added some things to try to make it relevant to you. But we're going to talk about physiology of turf grass, talking about selection of varieties and species, renovation, maintenance, which includes mowing, watering, fertilization, common problems, including disease, weeds, and insects, to get through the whole presentation. And again, Rochelle, I'm not going to have my chat feature opened up, so it's not distracting. But again, if there's a question that you think is relevant, just go ahead and shout that to me. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So benefits of turf grass. Can't say enough. Turf is a plant selection that kind of gets beaten up sometimes in different circles and media, social media, different groups. But it really has a huge benefit for us. And a lot of things, but we go through this whole deal. Really, some of the main things for us is going to be this improved water infiltration and retention when we get heavy rainfall like we had the last couple nights. A good turf area is able to take that water and let it absorb down into the subsoil instead of running off into our watershed and not allowing to infiltrate down into the soil. And again, with soil erosion as well, of just holding that soil in place so that we're not losing it during these heavy rain events that we have. Temperature, this heat island effect, turf does a great job of absorbing UV and turning that into plant energy instead of turning that into absorbed heat. So like a flat metal surface, you can imagine during the summer, a hot afternoon of walking across that, you'll burn the skin off of your feet versus walking out across the area of turf grass. That surface is cool because the plant is able to absorb the UV, the sunlight, and turn that heat energy into plant growth and development for it, and so it doesn't cause that accumulation of heat. So lots of good reasons why we want to grow turf. I think the benefits outweigh the negatives that a person may come up with, and we'll address how we remedy some of those potential negatives by our management of the grass. Physiology of grass. Okay, grass versus turf grass. Why do we have like 5 different types of plant, or 5 species of plant that we're kind of stuck with here is what we use as a turf grass? It's because of the way that these grasses grow. We've got over 500 native species of grasses that grow in Texas, and the vast majority of these are just not suitable for a lawn or for a turf grass, because the ones that we've honed in on, they can survive with a whole lot of care and a whole lot of beating that we provide to them by walking across them, driving across them, playing sports on, mowing regularly, and everything that we expect out of a turf grass. The majority of grass species just can't handle that amount of input. And here's kind of the reason why. If we look at the picture here on the left, is where we have all the physiological parts of the plant. And if we see right down in the center, where the grass is connected to the roots, is called the crown. This is typical to all grasses. But with the turf grasses that we grow, we have the crown, but we also have one or both of a rhizome, which is down here in the roots, the little black line below the soil. And what a rhizome is, it's an underground stem that connects to multiple young plants. So as the grass matures, these rhizomes grow out and they pop up new immature plants. And then more and more, the grass just keeps moving around by these underground stems. And then also we have other types that have where that green line is, and that's called a stolon. And a stolon is basically the same thing, but it's above ground. It's a stem that grows laterally across the soil surface, and it touches the ground. It develops roots and it develops a new crown and starts a young plant. So the turf grasses, the southern turf grasses that we grow here, they have either one or both of these habits of having stolons or rhizomes. And I'll talk a little bit more about why that's important. But beyond the picture on the right of just having the crown, node, and roots, this grass is not going to perform very well as a turf grass because it's going to be very susceptible to damage by mowing or by trampling by foot traffic. So other factors on affecting the species selections include our water quality, the amount of shade, the intensity of use, our mowing requirements, and the maintenance required for that turf species. So things that we want to think about when we're looking at lawns is what type of texture do we want out of a lawn? We want a very dense, thick canopy, or do we want something that's taller, more sparse, So we got to think about the appearance that we want out of turf grass if we're looking at a selection of grass here. We've got a fine textured grass, and we've got a taller, wider bladed, coarse textured grass. These are going to be different uses here. Obviously, the one on the left is going to be finer, cut shorter. This is going to be something that would be useful for a public park space, sports field, or an area that has a lot of foot traffic on it, compared to the grass on the right with the taller, coarse blades. These are not going to take foot traffic nearly as much. You have a lot more damage with this particular species. And then, of course, color. You have a range of coloration between turf, but maybe that's not quite as relevant to this. I think the reality of the presentation is we'll probably hone in mostly on this right here, which is St. Augustine grass. And then we'll talk more about hybrid Bermuda grass, which are our two species that are most common here in Fort Bend County. But you see this St. Augustine here, these are stolons. And so these are the above ground runners on the grass. And this is what makes this such a great grass for us, is because it has the ability to move around, to root, and to form new crowns, and to establish into bare areas in the lawn. And it will fill in a blank space pretty quickly, as long as you've got good soil there with good moisture, good aeration, and good fertility. That this species has the ability to not only move into new areas, but to repair itself pretty quickly. If you have a spot that's damaged, these runners will move into those areas and reestablish those bare spots pretty quick. This one here is showing a sod from a hybrid Bermuda grass, which shows the stolon. I'm sorry, shows the rhizomes. This blowed up picture there on the left shows this mat of rhizomes that are moving across underneath the lawn surface. So the good thing about this is that those rhizomes, similar to the stolons, are moving out. They're mining for new areas to grow into. They're propagating the plant into new crowns, and so it's able to not move out into new areas, and then also to fill in voids that may have been damaged from some sort of issue, whether it's disease or foot traffic or somebody peeling out with their lawnmower. And then we have different types that are just more bunch types. And so the bunching types of grass would be something more close to a zoysia, where it starts off in a small area and gradually the clumps get larger and will connect to each other. Not necessarily does it run around with rhizomes or stolons. The bunches, just the crown just gets larger and larger each year and moves and fills in those bare spots. So these are kind of our commons here. On the left-hand side, we have warm season species for the majority of our lawns. A lot of selections here for different uses, but again, our most common are going to be our Bermuda grass and our St. Augustine grass, because of their availability at turf farms, and two, their ability to perform pretty well in a majority of lawn spaces in our region. Grasses, the cool season grasses here on the right, for winter locations, you have some of these that kind of pop up on their own, but these grasses here are going to succumb once we get into mid-July through August in our summers. These grasses are going to die. It's too hot. They're not made for it. And so they will gradually diminish and go away on us. Some people do overseed with rye, either annual or perennial rye. It's not a terrible thing. But as we get into the end of April, 1st of May, those reseeding annual grasses really start diminishing and dying out as we get closer into the summer. So kind of just show a little bit of visualization on why we have these grasses that we've selected here. Is this is kind of where those cool season grasses perform pretty well at. In the northern states, we have a pretty good range here. We get into about zone 5 on USDA, and they start whittling down. The green area in the middle here is what we call this transition zone. And this is where you might be able to try one or the other, warm season or cool season, depending on your microclimates. But as we move further down into the southern region of the United States, we really start depending on these warm season grasses, primarily because of drought stress and heat stress in the summer. So we have a couple calendars here as far as the annual growth of these plants. I'm not going to talk about the first one because it's a little irrelevant to us because of the growing cycle of those cool season grasses. They like to grow in the spring, and then they like to grow again in fall and winter, where our warm season grasses, the bottom graph there, shows that they're going dormant through the winter, and then they're starting to pop up in spring. Their majority of their growth is in summer, and then they start to taper down as we get into the fall and go dormant again in the winter. This is going to be critical that you understand this process of this growth calendar for our warm season grasses, because not only does this show the green foliar growth, the leaf growth, active growing season of the plant, it also shows the corresponding root growth. If you look underground here, you can see that over the winter, the grass basically sheds off its root system, sheds off the vast majority of the roots to go into dormancy. And then in spring, when the soil temperature starts warming up, these roots start redeveloping. And then the vast majority of the roots for absorbing oxygen, water, and nutrients are really the strongest through midsummer. And then the fall, as it cools off, those roots start sloughing away and they go dormant back into the winter again. Won't do a whole lot of selection. I think a lot of us are probably already like set into our selection. We're not going to probably go out and establish new grass, but just for your reference here, the strengths of these grasses, the Bermuda grass, the strengths of it is that it can handle heat, it can handle drought, it handles traffic pretty well. We don't get a whole lot of disease pressure with the Bermuda grass, nor insect damage, but it does not like shade. We start trying to grow Bermuda grass underneath some oak trees, it's not working. It just does not tolerate shade whatsoever. It needs to be out in full sun. So you got a full sun spot. This is great. Handles heat, handles drought, and handles traffic, and doesn't get much insect or disease pressure. St. Augustine, the strength of it is that it's tolerant to shade. Now we got to use that word, tolerant. Okay. I have a lot of people that come to me and they say, well, St. Augustine's the grass you grow in shade. That's not, it doesn't like shade. It tolerates some amount of shade. So when you get into this dense canopy of some of these older live oak trees, the grass is going to diminish because it's just not getting enough. But it is the most tolerant of shade of these warm season turf grasses that we have. The weaknesses of St. Augustine grass: doesn't handle foot traffic very well. So if you've got a bunch of kids and they want to play soccer out in the lawn, it's going to get damaged. If you've got dogs running around the backyard, St. Augustine is going to get damaged. It just doesn't like it. It can succumb to cold damage. If we have these big, heavy freeze events, it can nip it back pretty hard. And also, it doesn't say here, but some other weaknesses of St. Augustine is going to be some insect and disease issues that are pretty common that most of us have probably dealt with to some degree. Rochelle, do we have any questions so far? Do you think we're doing okay?
We're doing good. No questions.
Okay, good. So we have a picture here, and this is real grass. But just shows that we have some trees there, but those canopies have been lifted up a little bit. We have a little bit of direct sunlight filtering through the canopy of these trees. This is where San Augustine grass does pretty well. But if these trees get bigger, twice as big of diameter, and the shade keeps moving further out away from this grass location, we would expect that the density of this grass is going to start to diminish and eventually kind of wither away. Got a whole lot of varieties that are out there to choose from. If we're getting St. Augustine turf from a garden center or retailer, most of it's just going to be common. If you want to really geek out, you can start asking for variety selections. But if you don't, you're probably just going to get a common, which is just usually a blend of St. Augustine grass. For our Bermuda grasses, we have what we call hybrids and then common Bermuda. Hybrids, basically, what we're seeing with these is that this finer texture, more bunched up foliage, a grass that can be cut lower in height versus the common, which tends to be more sparse, spread out, taller growth habit on it. Both are great. The hybrid, handles well to a lot of maintenance, but again, to maintain the grass to this look, it takes a lot of input, a lot of time, a lot of mowing, a lot of fertility and water to get it to be this common. This picture here, it's going to be a lot easier, a lot less inputs for you to maintain your lawn. And again, same thing, we can start requesting some varieties of these if we really want to geek out about it. Another grass that's showing up, and we're testing one here at our office right now, is Zoysia. This Matrella Zoysia is one species that is really a low growth, real fine, dense habit. This is a good for a sports field or a golf application. And then the Japonica, basically the Japonica is more coarse. It really looks more like a dwarfed version of a St. Augustine grass. Really pretty, nice texture to it. These are available at turf farms. They're going to be more expensive to replace into Zoysia for you. But it would be something if you're looking at taking out an old turf area that's not doing well and replacing it, would do a little bit of research on this Zoysia because it's performing pretty well here in our trials. And varieties. Winter color for each of these is going to look a little bit different. We did have some cool weather this winter, so we had pretty good dormancy in our turf grasses. And this is fine. The plant is shutting down for the winter, and we really want to let it shut down because it's a warm season grass that really just wants to shut down for a while and rest. So the St. Augustine, it's going to brown out, but you'll still see a little bit of green in there, kind of sparse within it. But these other grasses, the Zoysia, Centipede, and Bermuda, if we have a cool winter and we've done everything right, this grass should look tan, completely dormant on the surface. That's perfectly fine. We need to be okay with that. That's what the grass wants to do. And if it shuts down like this and you see that tan color across it, that means the grass is healthy because it actually had the energy to go through the process of dormancy to get to that point. What we don't want, and what we see with Bermuda grass a lot, is lawns that have been watered and fertilized late in the year where the grass is still green. And then we have this hard freeze. And you have probably seen, if you looked at these big open spaces, this weird worm zigzag pattern on the grass surface. It looks kind of like spaghetti of green and brown across the leaf surface. That's cold damage. That's turf grass that has been damaged from freeze because it wasn't dormant. we've encouraged that grass to stay awake longer in the year, and now we've allowed it to succumb to freeze damage, which is stress on the plant. It's not good for it. We really want to encourage these plants to go dormant in the winter and not stay green year round. The drought tolerance with these species varies quite a bit, where the Bermuda grass is going to be our highest in drought and heat tolerance. And our St. Augustine is kind of down here. It can handle drought, but it is going to start to show some drought stress, some visual symptoms of stress when we get into the summer, if we're not maintaining that turf to avoid the drought or heat stress. This one right here is a well-maintained artificial turf. And we see a lot of places that are going to replacing live turf grass with artificial turf. And there may be some applications where it works, where there's just zero maintenance of we don't have any budget to go out there and to mow grass and to control weeds and do everything that we need to do. But the offset, and what I kind of mentioned earlier, is that grasses do a really good job at absorbing heat and then turning that into plant energy. But these synthetic turf grasses don't do that. And so if you walk out there in the middle of the summertime, this synthetic turf surface temperature in this test that we did was sitting at 165 degrees, which is enough to cause a entry level skin burn, where just the asphalt surface was only 136 degrees. So considerations when we're thinking about our artificial turf, especially if it's out in a full sun spot and we've got children or we've got pets that are going to be utilizing this space. I'm not sending my dog or my daughter to walk across a lawn surface that's 165 degrees. How we doing, Rochelle?
We have questions that you'll be answering shortly about aerating, thatching, and fertilizing, so that should be coming up. But we
Yeah.
did have somebody ask about how often should the trees be trimmed to help with the sunlight coming through?
Very good question. Well, it's a deeper philosophy than that, and I have to be like a Dr. Phil on this sometimes. That if we're battling a live oak tree every year, that problem is not going to get any easier for you. The tree is going to continually grow larger. The canopy is going to be taller and wider. So there's only so much at some point you're going to have diminished returns on pruning because the tree is just going to be too large. So you have to be honest with that for a young tree, if we've got good grass growing underneath there, you might say every 2 or 3 years would be a good calendar for some canopy thinning. But just know that at some point the tree, there's just not going to be enough pruning that you're going to be able to do to allow the penetration of the sunlight through the canopy enough to sustain a quality turf grass, where you might need to start looking at turf grass alternatives, mulched areas, rock surfaces, low light ground covers. I know that's challenging for some people, but we can't beat reality. The reality of that, sometime that tree's going to win and the turf grass is going to lose. Let's get in here to the soil preparation component. I think this is important of, how do we grow grass, and it's only going to be as good as what is growing on. Well, I won't get into this slide too much, but soil texture is important. That we have aeration, that we have pore space within the soils, that it's not compacted. If you have a sandy loam soil or a sandy soil, compaction is not a big issue. But guess what? Most of us don't have that. We have good old black gumbo clay, which is very prone to compaction. So we need to start thinking about ways that we can address the soil compaction and to create that soil, that growing media where we're going to have plants growing successfully. This is just kind of for grins here of a planting site, probably in the hill country, where it looks like maybe about 1 inch of topsoil was put on top of a bed of caliche rock, and then the turf grass was put on top of that. You're not going to grow good grass on this spot. If you only have 1 inch of soil before you get down to a bedrock, this plant is perennially going to be suffering. So we've got to come up with a better way of doing this. In this situation here, we've got a lawn that's just in rough shape. You can see a little bit of sparse grass, a lot of weeds, some dead spots in it. What do we do here? Well, at some point we got to kind of look at how much grass we have and how much weeds and bare space we have and make a decision if we want to try to just grade this off, repair the soil, and then replant with sod. We've got to, you've got to kind of get to this point where, you have to make a drastic decision to either put some plugs in here, resod a couple areas, or to go ahead and start from scratch. A lot of times for me, if it's an area that's had disease or insect damage, it's sparse, there's a lot of weeds, you might be better off just to grade that off, amend the soil, and start with new sod. It's just in the long run, it's going to be better for you, and it's going to be cheaper. I know there's an expense with purchasing sod, but I think it pays off in the long run. This is probably a little bit larger scale of equipment that you would see, but aerification is something that I think is very important. Again, with our heavy clay soils, we need to break up that soil compaction to allow water, air, and nutrients to penetrate down into the soil. If that clay is compacted and it's hard, when we water with irrigation or we get rainfall, the majority of that is just moving across the surface and not actually penetrating down into the lawn. So a lot of different tools. This is equipment, the smaller picture right here, something similar that you could find at a tool rental place. A lot of times they'll have these, you can rent them for half a day, bring it home, aerate it, take it back, and you've done a whole lot of good work. Just note on any of these ones, if they're gas powered, gauge your personal ability, because this thing will throw your back out if you're not prepared for it. It's like riding a rodeo, particularly if you've got tree roots or you've got heavy compacted soil. This thing wants to pull you around and be the boss. Just be prepared for that. If you don't think that you're able or capable to operate this equipment, find somebody to help you do it. Don't do it if you don't think you're ready for it.
Boone, one
speaking-
question we had earlier in chat was about aeration. The question was how to do it ourselves.
Mhm.
Is this rental unit what you recommend, or is there anything in our garage, our toolbox that we can use?
Very good. I think I'll get to that a little bit on the next slide. So this is kind of what we're talking about here. We got this picture of a non-compacted soil where we have the soil particles spaced out, and we have room in there for water and air to move through those soil particles. When we get into that picture on the right, you start losing that ability for that water and air to penetrate through that soil surface. And if these can't make it through, then the roots of the plant are not going to be able to make it through. So we're just breaking that up so that we're allowing that penetration. The other reason why we're doing this is because we start to get this thatch growth. See this picture, and there's this big mat. There's about 1/2 inch there of just old, dead, decaying plant parts that are just compounded on top of each other. And so that makes it, one, it's hard for the grass to grow through. And then when we get rainfall, you might even think like a 1/4 inch rain is not even going to make it through that thatch. It's just going to sit there and wet the thatch. It's not going to get into the soil where the roots are. So we want to try to break that thatch up, and the aeration is going to help us do that. So here's kind of just a picture here of what we're seeing is we're trying to remove these tunnels that move down into the subsoil to allow that penetration of water and nutrients and oxygen down to the root system, allowing that root system to grow deeper down into the soil depth. Time frame right here. So going back to this warm season growth calendar, we see these two green ovals. These are our times where aeration is good. We want to do it while the weather is not brutal. So when we get into midsummer and it's just hot, we don't want to add more stress to the plants because we are actually, causing some plant damage with this process of aerification. So we want to avoid adding extra stress during that summer period. And there's really not much of a benefit of doing it during the winter because the grass is not actively growing and taking advantage of that extra pore space in the soil. So right now, I think it's optimum time. Springtime is probably number one time. If you can't get it done in spring, do it in the fall. All right, so here's probably the answer to the question. So we've got a couple versions of these. So I've seen a whole different myriad of these. You put them on your bottom of your shoes and it has some spikes and you just walk around. Or if it's a handheld thing that you just push the spike down into the ground, that helps temporarily because it does allows a little bit of airflow down into that subsoil. But we would think that with a heavy clay soil, as soon as it gets wet again, it's going to expand and it's going to just fill in those voids. And so you haven't really accomplished much. What you really wanted to do is a hollow tine tip on the spades. And what it does is that as it goes down, it cuts a tube of soil out and then deposits that tube up onto the surface, basically allowing, that space that you created to stay there for a longer period of time and not just fill back in because of the lack of resistance in the soil. We want to go with a hollow tine. Now, you hypothetically, you could find a tool that's hollow tined, that's manual, that you walk around the yard and just do that yourself. But the preferred way of doing it really is a gas powered aerator. One, because of just the coverage that you get with it. I found that, if you do a 4-hour rental at one of the rental locations, that's enough time to get the equipment home, study how to operate it, get the job done, get it loaded back up and back up there. And you can easily do that whole process within 4 hours. One consideration here is these things are trying to go about 4 or 5 inches deep into the soil. So be cognizant of any underground lines. If you've got cable lines buried in the ground, if you've got any shallow electrical lines, irrigation infrastructure, your spray heads. Typically, I would recommend somebody go out and do an auto run on your irrigation zones, and have some marker flags, and go out as those spray heads pop up and mark where the locations are, because this thing loves to hit irrigation heads. And trust me, if you don't mark them, you'll hit them. So note all that stuff ahead of time, and that way you can get this job done without causing additional work for you in the future. But good thing to do. And I said preferably spring. Fall is okay. In the well-maintained lawn situation, I'd say you could do this every 3 years, maybe 2 or 3 years in a rotation. And that's going to be sufficient. I don't think you need to do it every year, but every couple of years is probably a good idea to break that compaction up.
Boone, question.
Yes.
What is meant by Bermuda infestation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was kind of noting a St. Augustine grass. Sometimes we get either wild blown in coastal native Bermuda grass that grows into our St. Augustine grass, and there's not really an easy way to eliminate the Bermuda grass that's gotten in there without damaging the St. Augustine grass. And so we get a lot of questions of that, of how do I get rid of this, but I don't want to damage this one. Chemically, commercially, chemically, there's some options there. Those options are really not on the table for homeowners because we're talking about some selective herbicides that, if used inappropriately, can cause some environmental damage. So we don't tend to see those at the box stores. And if they're done inappropriately, we can end up causing just as much damage to our desired turf grass. So we kind of leave the chemical approach off the table. The only other way there is just manual control of just digging out those runners of the wild Bermuda grass that get in there. But that's what that slide was showing, is that, if you get in a situation where you really just want to have St. Augustine and you're getting this encroachment of this wild Bermuda grass, at some point, the decision may be to just eliminate everything and start from scratch with a turf species that you prefer, and then try to maintain it that way.
And really quick, one quick question. Do you pick up or rake up the aeration cores?
No.
Okay.
No, we like to leave those, and it's kind of funny. There's lots of jokes about dogs. It looks like a bunch of dogs came out there and had a rest stop afterwards. But the concept there would be that, that soil would eventually kind of break up on the soil surface, and maybe take some of those nutrients that were maybe lodged down deeper into the soil profile, move them up to the top, and as they settle in, we're adding some extra nutrients and soil structure on the surface.
And do we aerate before or after fertilization?
I don't think it's necessarily critical either way.
Okay. And what about companies? Do companies offer this aerating?
Yes. I'd say the vast majority of like the more visible commercial lawn maintenance companies will do aeration, dethatching, compost applications. You just have to ask your lawn care company. They'll do that for you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so planting, we'll go through this real quick. Sometimes maybe we need to be drastic and we have to just start over. We've had St. Augustine decline. We've had chinch bugs. We've had brown patch that's wiped us out. Now we all have is weeds. So it's just time to start over. So we will grade off all the old vegetation, bring in some compost, try to incorporate that into the soil surface so that we have a good planting bed, and then do our sod on top of that. We get into the prices. Sod is the most expensive way to go, but for me, it's really the way to go because you have a uniform surface to start with. We don't have as much problems with weeds growing through it. That establishes quickly and uniform. And so I think in the long run, you end up recovering costs that you would spend down the road of trying to get seeds, sprigs, or plugs to fill in this space. So we'll prepare the soil with some compost, make sure it's nice and moist. We don't want to really fertilize right at establishment. We don't want to burn those young roots of the sod as we put them out. After we've put in the sod, we water it for a while. It looks like it's starting to put on some new growth. Then we can gradually do some light fertilizations on there to get it going, but we don't want to do it right off the bat. And then once we start seeing a good even growth of foliage on there, we can start doing some light mowing, a couple weeks in. So this is kind of what we want to see here. Is this brick laying pattern where we do a crisscross pattern of laying the sod where the pieces are touching each other all the way to the sidewalk, all the way to the street curb, and then the pieces are crisscrossed, but so that we don't get areas in here where we start having some soil erosion in between those. It helps capture the water, keep it from shedding off the surface and causing erosion. We get quicker establishment. Don't do this. This is kind of drastic, but I've seen a lot of this, where people don't want to spend the money. You're trying to fill in some spots, but you're not doing any of the work to get the sod on a good planting bed. And the majority of this, from experience, is going to brown out and die. So, don't patch it in like this. If you're going to do something like this, you're better off using plugs and just plug into those spots that are maybe thin instead of using the full sod. Here's some plugs here, and some of them, this might be a Bermuda. They do pretty good. Others, maybe not so much. They're slow. St. Augustine is pretty slow to fill in. Zoysia is slow to fill in. Bermuda works pretty quick. But with this, you can imagine all these bare areas in between these plugs. You're going to start getting a lot of weeds growing in there. And so then we're going to have to start putting on some herbicides or hand pulling these weeds. And it's a challenge. So this might be a good idea if you just have a couple little spots here and there where the grass is bare. We might put in some plugs in there and manage those plugs. Probably not a bad idea if we're putting these in, is just those bare spots around the sides, is just cover that up with maybe about a 1/2 inch of compost, acting like a mulch to stop the weeds from germinating and to maybe stop that soil from drying out with direct sun exposure. But yeah, it's cheaper, but a lot of work, slow to fill in, get lots of weeds, harder to maintain. This is a sprig, so it's not really a plug. We have a piece of grass that doesn't really have roots attached to it. It has a little bit of this, has the crown, a little bit of the stolon on there, maybe some young immature roots on there. We can imagine with this is going to be challenging. A lot of like forage producers, if you have a hayfield, sprigging is kind of what they do because it's cost effective on a large scale when we're talking about acreage. But for a home lawn, probably not the way to go. And again, here, this is showing where you can kind of create your own sprigs if you wanted to. Pull up some of these stolons out of this St. Augustine grass, cut that away, and then we can bury that stolon at the ground surface and let these roots grow into the ground. It's an easy way for you to kind of cross propagate your grass in your lawn. Seeds, we say this is almost the cheapest. I just don't recommend it for our grasses here. Probably only with Bermuda grass because the Bermuda germinates pretty well for us. Getting into April while the weather is mild, it can germinate pretty well. We can get established turf grass growing, but the St. Augustine does not grow from seed. Sometimes you can find centipede or zoysia, but the germination of this grass from seed is just quite difficult at a homeowner situation. So I just don't think that it works. Your ryegrass, again, this is just for winter coverage. If you have some areas that you just want to, have some green overseeding in some specific areas that you're utilizing over the winter. So this is kind of showing here what you'd expect to see is this a loose seed bed that's been tilled up and raked out, and we can see a good spread of seeds across this area. And this is seed to soil contact is critical here. And then making sure that we don't allow this seed bed to dry out, extensively dry out in between waterings, because you can imagine as these seeds start to germinate and you have this tender young root radical trying to establish itself, first time that it dries out completely, it dies and it withers away. So you have to really keep track of your watering. Again, this is why I just tend not to recommend turf grass from seed with our southern grasses. It's just a lot of maintenance to get it started. So maintenance moving forward, stuff that we need to be thinking about for a healthy turf grass system is soil pH and nutrients, water, sunlight, soil structure, and then making sure that we're mowing at the right frequency and at the right mowing height is going to be pretty important too. This is again talking about this philosophical approach to inputs with anything with agriculture. I mean, this is agriculture that we're doing. We need all these inputs here of oxygen, sunlight, water, nutrients, and if any one of these are deficient, down showing this slat of wood down to that point, well, that means that the quality of this plant diminishes down to that lowest point. Okay, so like if this sunlight, we don't have sunlight, and this is way down here, then the plant growth is going to be at about 65-75% of its capability. But if I can address the sunlight, get more sun, bring that up, overall plant performance increases. So it's basically to say that you can't just focus on one thing or two things. You really need to focus on all these management areas so that the plant is healthy and happy and wants to grow. So we'll start with mowing. How often? Well, during the growing season, it's probably going to be once a week, especially with our grasses. If we're getting rainfall, here in Fort Bend County, our weather is crazy. But if we averaged it all out with 46 inches a year, with the majority of that happening during the summertime, our grass is growing, and it's gonna need to be mowed regularly so that it doesn't get too high. Because if the plant gets too high and then we try to bring it way back down real quickly, we're doing significant damage to the plant, because we only want to remove about 1/3 of the blade height with the single mowing. If we start having to cut more than that, then we're going to scalp the grass and we're really going to cause it to go into stress. So we want to avoid causing that stress. Mowers, a lot of options out there. I like this one here. I probably saw something like this before. A lot of ways to do it. There's good ways and there's bad ways. Let's start with the mowing height. St. Augustine grass likes to be kind of up on the high end. For summertime, we're saying about 4 inches. 4 inches, if we're honest, that's pretty high. Most people are doing it about 2 inches. And that's okay if you like mowing it a lot, but the grass is going to grow better if we grow it taller. So we'd have to train it and train ourselves to keep it mowed at that 3 to 4 inch height. If you got that Bermuda grass, it likes to be mowed lower. It actually, the varieties that we're using, it is a grass that actually wants to be mowed shorter. it performs better as a plant than it does if you let it grow tall. It starts getting thatchy and starts having issues. So we have here with our Bermuda grass, we're talking about 1 inch to 2.5 inches of height. And then our St. Augustine down here is 2.5 to 4 inches of height. And again, on both of these, I would encourage people to go on the higher end. So about 2.5 inches for the Bermuda grass, and then the 4 inches for the St. Augustine grass. This is kind of just showing an example. If we're cutting this grass here at different heights, we have on the left, 1.25 inches, 1/2 inch, and then 2 inch. Basically, this is Bermuda grass showing that Bermuda grass really likes to grow at that shorter height. It's cleaner looking. It's got a good color. But as we bring the height up on there, we start having some more thatch build up within the plant. So it just doesn't want to be that high. It wants to be shorter. So, look at kind of the happy medium of where we're comfortable mowing this. If we want to keep this grass at 1/2 inch, we might be mowing that twice a week. So you have to keep that in consideration. You can start extending these mow frequencies as we get taller. Brandy's over here trying to mess me up. Okay, so taller grass equals deeper roots. The higher the leaf blade is, those roots are going to grow down deeper. The deeper the roots are, the more they're able to mine for water and nutrients that are down into the soil. So let's think about keeping it on the high side. Also, that's going to decrease the frequency of mowing so that it helps save some of your time as well. So again, this 1/3 rule, we want to take about 1/3 off the top. If we get more than that, we're really scalping it and we're causing some damage to the grass. Only one time a year I would recommend going more than this. It's going to be like that first cut in spring when we're taking out that winter thatch. Might not be a bad idea to cut it a little bit lower, put a bagger on there to be able to cut all that winter thatch out of there. So you start off spring with a good turf establishment. Make sure your mower blades are sharp. You can see here between one or the other, which one do you think that plant is going to be stressed or not? We get a good clean cut on there. That wound is going to heal up a lot faster versus one here that's shredded up. It's not going to heal quickly. Plant's using more energy to heal that wound. And we're also opening that up maybe for some disease infection moving forward. So I would say before you start in spring, flip that mower over, check those blades. You can hand sharpen them yourself. That's great. If you're not good with that, is bring those into your small engine shop, have them sharpen those blades for you. Mulching mower versus non-mulching, to mulch or not to mulch. So the concept with the mulching mower is you've got a blade on there that has some cross angles on it that shreds those clippings up into smaller pieces so that they will be digested in that lawn surface a lot quicker. So if you're going to not bag, you might look at making sure that you have a mulching blade installed on your mower. If it's just a regular side discharge or a bagger discharge blade, those clippings are going to be full length, large, and sometimes we can start having some issue with thatch and with disease because it takes longer for those leaf blades to break down. Watering. Again, we're following the same thing here. We got the grass is growing in the summer and the roots are starting to regrow through spring and into summer. So let's focus our irrigation. If we're trying to water the lawn, don't water in the winter because all you're watering is weeds. You want to start your watering about the same time that you start maintaining the grass. So around us right here, it's kind of the end of March going into April, is that's where we start looking at maybe applying irrigation if we need it, if it's droughty outside. And then diminishing that as we get into the fall, into October, if it's cooling off, we're seeing those cold fronts and a little bit of fall rain, let's cut that irrigation off. If we apply too much water, all we're doing is asking for trouble with weeds and maybe disease. And also, if you're on municipal water, they're not giving it away. It costs you money. So be aware of that. Because, if we take, the 1 million residents here in Fort Bend County and we're all watering the yard year round, we're wasting a lot of water. We almost can't pump enough of it out of the ground fast enough to meet our demand in society. So always be cognizant how much irrigation that we're putting on the lawn. If you're not sure of it, a good internet search on watering, scheduling watering, is pretty easy to find, how often, how much water we need to be applying. Again, here, this is something familiar that we've been seeing the last couple of years. This water conservation efforts in some areas. For us, we've got a lot of good groundwater. We've got river water. Some areas in the state don't have that. And there's been times in the last couple of years where they've just about run out of water. And so you have to let this happen. You got to turn the irrigation systems off and let those grasses grow summer dormant. Here's an option here. If you get into water restrictions, these dyes that some of these companies have been using, just kind of covers the grass up temporarily. Cool thing about this is that as we get into rainfall again, the grass will grow right up through this and it's not phased. And you see some creative versions of this as well. This photo was taken somewhere in Austin, and you can see the sprinklers are on up there. All right, let's move on. That's a distraction. So how much water do we need? Well, it depends on what our expectations of the turf grass are, but we need to, keep conservation in mind. We got to take the time. I think it's kind of challenging because most people have some type of an irrigation controller installed system, and it's just kind of automated and it's doing its thing, but we really need to know how much water, how often, and we need to understand ways that we can dial that down to make our systems more water efficient. Because sometimes we're probably applying too much water and we're unintentionally causing weeds and disease pressure in the lawn. So this picture right here shows kind of how the turf grass guys do it. This is probably a little bit more advanced than most people want to do. You can take a tuna fish can, a coffee can, and run your irrigation system a normal run time, and then just measure the depth of water. And that'll tell you how much water in inches we're applying to that space each time we're watering. This right here is a water audit where they're measuring how much water each of their zones in the irrigation is putting out and trying to average out those how much they're applying for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or an hour. This is maybe a little overkill, but an idea of what somebody would do if you're trying to really understand how much water we're putting in the lawn. Now, here's a picture I think that this speaks in volume. This was a St. Augustine grass drought tolerance trial, and it shows different rates of irrigation per week, and shows kind of this point of diminishing returns, where we say 1 inch a week in the growing season during the warm season. Well, that's the picture here on the right, 1 inch a week. The grass is beautiful, thick, dark green. But if we cut that in half, one right here in the middle, doesn't look bad. When we start going way down here, yeah, we got some problems for this 1/10 of an inch or less. The grass will start going into some type of a stress mode. Not good. So we need to cut maybe cut this back and maybe add more and try to be right in this range right here, what we call deficient or deficit irrigation. Deficit irrigation is cutting that back to a point where the grass is acceptable visually, but we're able to cut back water. We're using half as much water as we typically would recommend, and visually, plant looks pretty good. So this is a little bit of work for us to dial that down on our irrigation until we get to this point that we're happy with it, but we're not using as much water that we have to be using over here. We start really cutting back of our homeowner, our residential water use. That's great for the environment, and then it's great for your pocketbook as well. So on the flip side to that, we have this, what they call this continuum of, or the point of diminishing returns, right? So here's our like 1 inch a week. Grass is at its optimum growth, but a lot of people are probably guilty of over applying. And once we get past that, plant health starts to diminish, goes downhill, because as we're putting too much, we're drowning the root systems, we're causing disease spread on the foliage, we're inviting insect pests because of distress on the plant. So we don't want to go to that point. We want to be kind of over here in this moderately dry, between moderately dry and optimum, where the plant is looking good and we're not applying nearly as much water. So this was a little study that was done, it was about 15 years ago up at College Station, where we took a bunch of different types of grasses, settled them in really nicely, and then we covered them up and we basically starved them from water for about 60 days, open it back up, turn the water back on. And this is basically just to show how drought tolerant these grasses are. As we get into summer and we think, oh man, I have to water this grass because it's going to die. It's not going to die. It's probably going to die because you overwater it, versus it going into a summer dormancy. So for instance, this is St. Augustine grass showing here. Once they opened it up, this has about 30% of live green growth on the plant. And within about 60 days with this normal care, it's back up to 100% green growth. This one here, Zoysia grass. When we started, almost down to zero. Like it was brown, brown, brown. About 60 days later, with this normal care, back up to 100% green ground cover stand. Third one, buffalo grass and Bermuda grass. Again, right here at the beginning, they look pretty rough. And just 60 days later, with normal care, they're all back up to 100% living green ground cover. So all these warm season turf grasses can handle drought. They can handle it. They're going to go into this summer dormancy where they start turning brown. But as soon as we get rainfall and this optimum growing conditions again, they will come back. So don't flood them during the summer if we're getting a drought. Especially don't overwater. All right, let's get into fertilization a little bit. Here's the soil.
Boone, quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry. Best time of the day to water?
Best time of the day to water. Good question. So we think about this thing called evapotranspiration, where the plant is breathing, it's kind of losing water, or water is being evaporated off of the soil surface, is during the middle of the day. So watering during the day, we're not getting the most efficient use out of that water. A lot of it's being evaporated. And then the flip side to that, so if we water at night, we create this disease triangle where we have this moist environment that is suitable for disease development. So we don't want to water at night. So really the best time is going to be early morning hours, at sunrise, maybe right before sunrise, so that we're capitalizing on that time frame where the sun is not so extreme, and that water is allowed to penetrate down into the soil, so we're getting the maximum use out of each drop that we're putting out there. and then we're not causing disease on the plant. If the early morning doesn't work, probably the second best is going to be late afternoon, early evening, while the temperatures start to cool off, the sun intensity starts to diminish. But we want to water early enough that we allow the leaf surface of the grass to dry off before sunset.
Okay, and can we quickly get your thoughts on watering with this new heat wave we had last year? And if we get it this year, heat over 100 degrees, 115 degrees. What are your thoughts on watering during that time?
Um, well, I think we need to be cognizant of water supply, because if everybody's kind of freaking out about watering their plants, we get ourselves into a water availability issue real quick. So, be thinking about this deficit irrigation, where we're putting out just enough out there to keep the plant from going into dormancy or going into stress. But just cutting it back, thinking about this half-inch per week application going through the summer, where that's enough to keep the plant going, but we're not wasting water. You need to look at combined irrigation. So rainfall, that accounts for water. So if you don't have a system that has a rain freeze sensor or some type of a moisture sensor on there, that's up to you to know that we had rain and that you need to cut the irrigation system off for a couple days until the grass starts showing that drought stress again. Main thing there is just don't be a water hog. Don't waste water. It takes a little bit of time and effort to be cognizant and aware of that and respond. But you bought the house, so you're responsible for understanding that.
Thank you.
Yep. Let's get into this. This is a soil sample analysis for lawns, and it's going to show on here, the levels of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and calcium, magnesium, and sulfur, and our pH, all of which are critical to plant growth and development. This is something, if you're geeky about lawn, you really want to dial it in and make it look nice, I think you need to soil sample, because this helps you dial in your nutrient applications so that you can balance out all these minerals in the right way that the soil needs and the plant needs, so that you have optimum plant growth. Basically, this is a lot better going from a soil sample than it is just going and buying a fertilizer that says lawn food, throwing it out there on the lawn, assuming that that's what the plant needs. The vast majority of the time, it isn't. So the soil analysis that you take will help you understand that and dictate response. So I do recommend it, especially if you like being the person who is the neighborhood cool lawn guy that has the lawn everybody thinks is great. You need to do this. Now, environmental losses from fertilizers, it's a big thing, because you got all these people that are all taking care of their lawns, and if they're not doing it right, or having those minerals are being leached off into groundwater and surface water, or it's volatilizing into gases into the atmosphere, which none are good things. So this makes it even more important to dial in your fertility, so that we're applying what the plant needs and not anymore. We're not having the excess of any of these, so that they go to waste, or they end up causing some of this environmental degradation. This is just a pretty nasty graph here of talking about how nutrients start to diminish in availability with our change in pH. Our neutral pH, or pH that we want, is going to be about 7.0, 6.5 to 7.0. And this graph really shows why, because all these nutrients that the plants need are most available to the plant and at that pH level. As the pH becomes acidic, the availability of those nutrients diminishes. Same way, if they become alkaline, the availability of those nutrients start to diminish. So that's why we say right here, this is the sweet spot, about 6.5 to 7.0 is the pH level that we want to be in. I'll go back to this. Maybe I'll go back to this and it shows our pH on this sample was 6.2, slightly acidic. So it's a little on the acid side, not terrible, but we might want to think about adjusting that pH up a little bit so that the nutrients are more available for the plant. Nutrient management tips, I would recommend soil testing every 2 or 3 years to give you a base idea of the nutrients that we need. Use our frost dates to determine our fertilization. Don't over exceed, particularly with nitrogen applications, because that's going to leach off and cause problems. And if we can, let's use the mulching blades in there and recycle those clippings back into the lawn because they're recycling the nutrients back into the lawn space. So basically it's free fertilizer. All right, so this slide here is a little geeky and it shows here this red oval is our last frost date, February 14th, which suggests that our first fertilization time for our region is April 1st. And I would agree with that. That's the time where our grasses are starting to really wake up and green up. So I would not fertilize until about April 1st. If you fertilize earlier than that, well, we're doing two things. We're fertilizing weeds and we're encouraging that grass to wake up too soon. And then if we get a late season freeze, we're going to cause extra stress to the plant. So just wait. And then the flip side to that is we look at the last time. This is saying here the last fertilizer application by October 15th. But for me, really, I'm going to go way forward on that, almost to about September 1st or the very end of August. And what that does is it allows, if I put a fertilizer in at September 1st, plant's going to use up what it needs, diminish the majority of that excess nutrient bank before the grass goes dormant for winter. So we haven't really left much there for weeds to take advantage of. If we're doing like these winterizer fertilizers, I hate to tell you, but you're just fertilizing winter weeds, and then you got to come back and put a herbicide out there or hand pull the weeds. So don't fertilize too late. Again, try to get it done by September. Too little, poor growth. You get stress on the plants. If you get too much fertilizer, plant grows too fast, and we're getting disease and insects. So we want to be right there in the sweet spot so that we get the right amount of growth that we want. The plant is happy, and if the plant is happy, it's going to be able to avoid insect and disease pressure. Avoid quick release fertilizers because you get this big spurt of growth, and then it kind of falls off real quick. We want to look for a slow release fertilizer that the growth habit's going to look more like this. It's going to be gradual, so it's going to last longer, and it ends up with a healthier plant. If you got this roller coaster, quick up and down, the plants don't like that. They like it the slow, gradual increase and slow, gradual fade off. If you go to our soil testing lab website, which is soiltesting.tamu.edu, it's got a whole range of fertilizer calculators on there to help you dial in the nutrients that you need to apply down to the pounds of each nutrient, the types of fertilizers that you can use, and then how much you need to put on per 1,000 square foot of lawn space. It's all in there and easy to use. Avoid this. We have this stripping here where we're using a drop spreader. You can follow the footsteps of this person. So if you have a drop spreader, make sure that you're following the right pattern. You might even do a crisscross here so that you get better coverage from your fertilizer, or maybe avoid a drop spreader and do a broadcast spreader where you're shooting this out into maybe a larger area, getting more even coverage. lawn problems.
Boone?
We'll go-
Boone,
Yes.
very quickly. Just a heads up on time. It's
Mm-hmm.
2:25.
Yep. I'm on it. We're gonna, I'm gonna
Okay,
get through a couple things here real quick, and then we'll take the back end of this, and we'll ask folks to maybe bring those particular questions to the help desk.
thank you.
Issues that we're dealing with, if we have a poor lawn, one is our pH issues. It's either too high or too low. We have some significant imbalances of fertility. One is water, either too much or not enough, soil compaction, improper mowing height. We're either cutting it too high or too low. We've got too much shade, or we've got too much salinity or salt buildup from our water supply. Not much we can do about this except cut back on the watering. If we've got a salty water source, just don't use so much of it. Use an integrated approach to lawn care. This is just kind of common sense. I won't spend much time on that one. Signs of excess shade. A lot of times our leaf blades are going to be weak, yellowy in color, and sometimes almost white in color. Just shows that we're not getting enough light for photosynthesis to occur to develop chloroplasts within the foliage. And we'll get into that. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna skip through a couple things here real quick. These are good, but they're not. Okay, so this one's important. So large patch, this one we all see. Typically people call this brown patch. Same thing. This is a disease, a fungal disease that is common now, and usually in the fall we see a little bit of it. Main thing with this is water. We're putting too much water out there when the plant doesn't need it. And this fungi loves this wet environment, wet, cool environment. So if we can remove the excess water, a lot of times this disease will just go away. Take all root rot is another monster. Unfortunately, this one is just not as easy. We start seeing this in the summertime when we start having heat stress on the plant. It looks more like this, where you have this kind of dead area that kind of starts moving around in the lawn. There are some fungicides that you can use on this to try to get under control. But this is something really, you'd have to contact us here at the office, and we could go through a step-by-step process of how we try to remedy that disease and help you move forward. And this is one that maybe 15 years ago, we didn't see that much of it, but more recently, after a couple hurricanes and some nasty weather, it's starting to show up more often. Cyanoxidine decline. This is a virus, but basically what happens is the plant just starts falling apart. And it's not growing actively. It starts thinning out. One, get it tested. We have to identify the virus within the plant, and then start looking at how do we want to treat that area. The best thing is go with a new variety of turf that maybe is resistant to this virus. And weeds, lots of weed pressure. Things to know about weeds is we have cool season weeds and we have summer weeds, and there's different applications, particularly if we're getting into herbicide control. There's a range of products, but we have to be very careful about what we're applying when, that we're doing it without causing damage to our turf grass and maybe causing environmental damage. So maybe this is a good control method for people. If you just have small amount of weeds, it's manageable, pull them out by hand. There's no use using chemicals out there if we don't need to. Just remove those out of the lawn manually, and we'll save ourselves some money. Grassy weeds are difficult to control because we're trying to maybe spray a weed that's a grass on a grass. So you can imagine there's some products there that are difficult to work. I'd be real careful with these. because when we get into anything with temperatures of 90 degrees or higher, which is like every day between here and the end of September, you're gonna burn your grass. So be real careful. Always read the label before you put any of these products out on the lawn. Broadleaf weeds, there's annual weeds here, and then there are perennial weeds, weeds that come back, the same plant comes back each year. And there's level of difficulty of controlling these based off of their growth habit. Again, we can look at manually removing these, or if we're using herbicides, again, always be real careful that we're applying the correct product at the correct level, the correct time of year in application, because we can cause a lot of damage. There's a lot of products that are out there. Some of them are great. Some of them can really harm your grass. I'd always look for this. A lot of these that you see are going to say Southern Lawns. So we want to look on the product and make sure it says St. Augustine grass or Southern Lawns or Safe on Bermuda grass. Read the label. I'm the guy at the garden center who's peeling the little label up and reading the inside of it before you purchase it. Sit it on the ground there and read it. You want to make sure that you're putting the right product out there, because some of these products, if they're not made for St. Augustine grass, they're going to kill it, just like the weeds, and you end up with a big dead lawn. So don't be that person. Trust me, this is what I do. I see that a lot. And let's see, I'll get through all these weeds real quick here. Again, this was a horror story where somebody put out the wrong product, killed their yard, completely killed it. Other things to control weeds is regular mowing, proper irrigating and fertilizing, so we're not encouraging weed growth, hand removal, and then the treatment. You can use a pre-emergent weed killer or a post-emergent weed killer. Again, I can't tell you enough. Just make sure that you're studying up. If you're not sure, contact us here at the office. We'd be happy to give you some recommendations on products and when to apply those. And maybe some stuff to stay away from as well. Insects, a lot of insects that we deal with sod. We gotta be aware of those. Best thing to do is scouting. Take a cup of coffee, go out in the morning every week or two, and walk around and just look for stuff that doesn't look right early on. If we can address any of these things early stage, they're easy to get under control. But if we wait too long, there's not really much we can do with an insecticide if we let it get out of hand. There's things that we can do on the front end that aren't as drastic, like with the integrated pest management approach. But if we find these things after the grass is dead, then there's no use for applying a product to that. A lot of damage here, a lot of different culprits for that damage. Most of the time, they're just trying to get at bugs that are in the ground, grubs, earthworms, and so forth. So just trying to manage those. I'm not even going to do that. The chinch bugs, webworms. There's a little picture of a webworm there, fall armyworm. So each of these have a season where they're active. It's just being a little bit of aware of when through the calendar we might be seeing pressure from different pests. An ounce of just studying this early on and knowing how to identify the symptoms of some of these insect impacts is going to be helpful to you. Keep that grass healthy versus responding after the fact. If you see something like a yellowing or discoloration of the foliage, take a picture of it and then reach out to our help desk here at the office early on, and we can help kind of guide you through that process of how you move forward. So some parting thoughts here. Mowing, mow at the proper height, mow at the proper frequency, fertilize correctly, don't under or over fertilize, water, don't under or over water. Just have everything that the plant needs at the right time, at the right level. This is something I would recommend that you do. Is just create a little chart for yourself. It can be as geeky as this, or just a hand note of when you've applied fertilizers or any type of ag chemical product, when you've been mowing, your mow height, when you sharpen the blade on the mower, just to help you keep track of all your inputs so that you can help create some type of a schedule for yourself, make this easier next year. Because we're thinking of a million things and lawn care is somewhere down at the bottom of that list. So it's not a bad idea to have something like this to jog your memory, things that you did successfully in the past. A gang of resources here, and you'll get all these with the recording. And these resources will be given to you next week with a follow-up. So no need to hurry up and write those down here. AgriTurf is our turf grass program at Texas A&M. This is our soil and water testing laboratory, soiltesting.tamu. The plant clinic is our disease diagnostic lab. So if you have grass that looks diseased, they can test it and tell you what's going on with it. FortBend.agrilife.org is our Fort Bend County Extension website. And fantastic Fort Bend County Master Gardeners can be found here at fbmg.org. And last but not least, we have a cool adventure, fun activity for you to do here at the end of the class. You can follow the link here, or you can scan this cool QR code with your phone. If you don't mind, our team here has developed a small survey, a couple questions to help us maybe improve our programs for later dates. To help give your input on what we did good and what we can improve on. So I appreciate your time. If you can snap on that and give us that feedback. If you don't have your phone with you here right now, you will get the link to this survey with the follow-up next week with your registration that you submitted for the class. So you can get it then as well. But either way, however you do it, and we appreciate the feedback.
Thank you so much, Boone. That was a lot of information, and we have lots of chat saying thank you, and everybody really enjoyed it and really got a lot out of it. And thank you to our team in the background for helping with questions and links and the Zoom. Also, as Boone mentioned, we do have the survey. If you can please fill that out. And also, I have put the link in the chat to register for our other classes in the Landscape Success Series, so you can do that there. We do have some questions, but we did also post the helpline information in the chat, and you can ask us those questions there. I don't know, Boone, if you want to answer a few, we can end the class and you can still answer questions, or we can just send them to the hotline.
Let's do some questions. I've got time.
Okay.
If you want to, you can stop the recording for the presentation, and then we can just